"Can you pretend to be my brother?" The single dad CEO said, "For tonight, yes." Harry Vale had been asked many strange things in hotel hallways. Investors had asked him to save failing projects. Reporters had asked him to explain grief in one sentence. His 9-year-old son had once asked whether robots could miss people if they were programmed correctly. But this was new. The woman standing in front of him looked like she regretted the question before it finished leaving her mouth. She was breathing too fast, one hand gripping the strap of a cheap black clutch, the other smoothing the side of a navy dress that had clearly been ironed with hope more than money. Behind her, through the open ballroom doors, a private school fundraiser glittered with champagne glasses, white tablecloths, and parents who knew how to make kindness sound like an evaluation. Harry had stepped into the hallway to take a call from Noah. His son's had been small and flat on the phone. "You said you'd be home before I fell asleep." Harry had looked down at his tuxedo shoes, guilt pressing behind his ribs. "I know. The event is running late. You always say events run late." That was where the call had ended. Not with anger, not with tears. Just the quiet click of a child who had learned not to expect too much. Harry was still staring at the dark screen when the woman backed into him. Now she was looking past him, toward a man approaching from the ballroom, with a polished smile and a woman in a silver dress beside him. "Please," she whispered, "just for 5 minutes." Harry followed her gaze. The man walking toward them had the relaxed confidence of someone who had never wondered whether he belonged in expensive rooms. His smile widened when he saw the woman cornered in the hallway. Harry understood enough. Not everything, enough. He slipped his phone into his pocket and straightened his slightly crooked tie. "For tonight," he said, "yes." The woman blinked, stunned by how quickly he agreed. Then the man reached them. "Lena," he said, concern arranged neatly over judgment. "There you are. Brittany and I were worried you'd changed your mind." Lena Brooks lifted her chin. "I'm here for Sophie, of course." His eyes moved over her dress. "You look tired." The woman beside him, Brittany, gave a sympathetic smile sharp enough to cut ribbon. "It must be so hard coming straight from work. I admire that." Harry felt Lena tense beside him. Before the silence could swallow her, he extended his hand. "Evan Brooks," he said. "Lena's brother." Lena coughed once. Harry ignored it. The man's eyebrows lifted. "Brother." "From Portland," Harry added, because lies sounded more believable when they were unnecessary. Lena shot him a sideways look that said Portland. Harry gave her a faint smile that said commit. Mark shook his hand, confused and irritated. "Mark Callahan, Sophie's father," Harry said. "That explains the shoes." Lena pressed her lips together. Mark glanced down. "Excuse me? Nothing." They just have a very confident relationship with attention. For the first time that evening, Lena almost laughed. Mark did not. Brittany's gaze lingered on Harry's face. "Have we met before?" "Possibly," Harry said. "I have one of those faces people blame for delays at coffee shops." Lena looked down quickly, hiding another smile. They re-entered the ballroom together. The fundraiser was being held in one of Seattle's old luxury hotels, the kind with chandeliers shaped like frozen rain and carpet thick enough to silence discomfort. Lena had arrived late after managing the night shift at a smaller hotel across town. She had changed in the employee restroom, pinned her hair in the mirror, and told herself she could survive 2 hours for Sophie. Her daughter's painting had been chosen for the student auction. That was why she came. Not for Mark, not for Brittany, not for the mothers wearing pearls and soft cashmere who spoke about scholarships as if poverty were an inspiring seasonal theme. Across the room, Sophie stood beside her small canvas, hands folded in front of her green dress. She was 7. With serious eyes and hair Lena had braided in the morning before school. When she spotted her mother, her face brightened, then faltered as she saw Mark and Brittany beside her. Sophie was old enough now to notice tone, old enough to understand when adults smiled at Lena, like she was a problem they were too polite to name. Lena hated that most of all. Mark leaned close as they moved toward the auction display. "You know, if tuition is being too much, we should talk realistically." Lena kept her voice level. "Not tonight. I'm only thinking about Sophie." Brittany touched Lena's arm lightly. "There are hardship funds. I know someone on the committee. They're very discreet." Lena felt heat rise in her face. Harry saw it. He also saw Sophie watching. The auctioneer began introducing the student artwork. When Sophie's painting came up, Mark smiled in a way that made Lena uneasy. It was a watercolor of a strange, beautiful house with many doors, each painted a different color. Some were large, some tiny, some crooked. There were windows glowing yellow and a garden path that seemed to lead in every direction. The bidding started gently. Then Mark chuckled to a nearby parent. Lena always did have a soft spot for emotional financial decisions. The words were quiet but not quiet enough. Lena stiffened. Harry reached for his bidder card. He could end this in 10 seconds. Raise the price absurdly high, silence Mark. Make Sophie's painting the most expensive piece in the room. It was what Harry Vale knew how to do. Write the check, solve the problem, control the room. But Lena's eyes caught his. No, not pleading. Warning, do not make me smaller by making yourself bigger. Harry lowered the card. Instead, he stepped towards Sophie and crouched slightly so he was at her level. This is an impressive house, he said. Can you tell me why it has so many doors? The room quieted, because wealthy adults loved few things more than a child saying something meaningful in formal wear. Sophie looked at Lena first. Lena nodded. Then Sophie looked at the painting. It's for people who don't know which door they're allowed to use, she said. So there are lots of doors. That way nobody has to feel locked outside. No one spoke. Even Mark seemed briefly stripped of commentary. The auctioneer lowered his paper. Lena's eyes filled before she could stop them. Harry stood slowly. He had entered the evening as a stranger playing a role, a fake brother, a convenient lie in a tuxedo, but looking at Lena he no longer saw a woman who needed rescuing. He saw a mother fighting to stay dignified in a room determined to measure her. And Lena, watching Harry step back instead of taking over, understood something too. Maybe this man was rich. Maybe he was smooth and strange and far too good at lying about Portland. But he had just done what no one in that room had done all night. He had stood beside her without making her disappear. For the next 40 minutes, Harry Vale became Evan Brooks from Portland. He did it with such quiet confidence that Lena almost forgot she had invented him in a hallway out of panic. Almost. When one of the mothers asked how often he visited Seattle, Harry replied that he came whenever Lena needed someone to fix a cabinet, open a jar, or remind her that she had once tried to cut her own bangs with kitchen scissors. Lena nearly choked on her water. That was one time, she said, playing along. Harry nodded solemnly. A tragic time, Sophie giggled. That small sound loosened something inside Lena's chest. For most of the evening, Sophie had stood near her painting like a tiny guard protecting something fragile. But with Harry she relaxed. He did not talk over her. He did not bend down in that exaggerated way adults used when pretending children were adorable decorations. He asked what color door was the safest one. Sophie told him the yellow door was for people who were scared, but pretending not to be. Harry looked at the painting for a long moment after that. Lena noticed. Something about Sophie's answer had reached him in a place he had not guarded well enough. My son used to draw spaceships with emergency exits on every side, he said quietly. Lena turned. You have a son? Harry's expression shifted, as if he had accidentally stepped out of character. He's 9. Before Lena could ask more, Harry's phone vibrated. The name on the screen made his face soften and tighten at the same time. He stepped toward the hallway to answer, but not far enough that Lena missed the change in his voice. Noah, hey buddy, a pause, I know. I said I'd be home earlier. Another pause, longer. I can bring the robot kit tomorrow. Lena heard enough. Not the child's words, but the shape of them. Disappointment had a sound even through silence. Harry rubbed his forehead. No, I'm not trying to buy my way out of it. But his tone said he knew that was exactly what he had been doing. He ended the call a moment later and stood in the hallway looking at the dark phone screen. Lena joined him, partly because she needed air, partly because she recognized the face of a parent who had run out of good answers. You know, she said gently, kids don't always need gifts. Harry glanced at her. She shrugged. Sometimes they just want you home before they fall asleep. The words landed harder than she expected. For a second, Harry looked almost offended. Then the defensiveness passed, leaving only tired honesty. My wife died 3 years ago, he said. Lena went still. I'm sorry. He nodded once, not dismissing the sympathy, but not inviting it to sit down either. Noah was 6. For a while I thought if I could keep everything else perfect, he'd hurt less. The best school, the best therapist, the best room, the newest kits, the safest schedule. But not you, Lena said softly. Harry gave a faint, painful smile. Not enough of me. Lena looked back through the ballroom doors, where Sophie was explaining her painting to an older couple. I get that, she said, not the same way. But I get trying to prove you're enough with everything except rest. Harry studied her. Mark, he asked. Lena exhaled. We got married too young. I got pregnant. Dropped out of interior design. He always made it sound like he was the practical one, and I was the emotional one. She laughed without humor. Funny thing is, I handled the bills, the doctor appointments, the school forms, the bedtime fevers. But because he had the better job, he got to call himself stable. Harry's jaw tightened. Lena saw it and lifted a warning finger. Don't go rich man with a plan on me. I wasn't. You were thinking very loudly. That made him smile despite himself. Across the ballroom, Brittany watched them. At first she had only thought Evan Brooks looked familiar. Now curiosity had become suspicion. She typed into her phone, searching combinations: Seattle Tech CEO tuxedo, Valeworks founder, smart home construction gala. Then she found him, Harry Vale of Valeworks, widowed father. One of the major donors the fundraiser committee had spent months hoping to impress. Brittany looked up from the screen, her eyes narrowing. Evan Brooks from Portland was not Lena's brother. He was richer, more famous, and far more dangerous to the evening's careful social order. She moved toward Mark. Lena did not see. Mark reached her first. He caught her near the edge of the ballroom, his voice low enough to keep the scene private, and cruel enough to make privacy useless. "What are you doing?" he asked. Lena stiffened. "Standing. Don't be cute. That man is not your brother." Her stomach dropped. Mark stepped closer. "Are you trying to embarrass me, or is this some new strategy? Bring a wealthy man to school events and hope people forget you're barely keeping up." Lena's face went hot. "Stop. No, you stop. Because if you keep acting unstable, I'm going to have to reconsider whether our current custody arrangement is really best for Sophie." The words hit her exactly where he aimed them. For a moment the ballroom blurred. Not Sophie. Anything but Sophie. Harry had heard enough. He appeared beside Lena, all calm posture and sharpened eyes. There was a version of him that could have ended Mark with one sentence, one name, one truth. He could have become Harry Vale in front of everyone and made Mark shrink beneath the weight of it. Lena saw that intention form. She touched his sleeve, barely no. Harry looked at her. She did not want to win by borrowing his power. She did not want Mark silenced because a richer man had entered the room. So Harry stayed Evan. Or perhaps, for the first time that night, he stayed simply himself. He looked at Mark and spoke evenly. "Threatening of mother with her child doesn't make you look responsible. It makes you look afraid of losing control." Mark's face hardened. "This is none of your business. You made it everyone's business when you used Sophie as leverage." Lena's breath shook, but she did not step back. For once, someone stood beside her without speaking over her. Mark glanced toward the ballroom, aware now that a few people had begun to watch. His polished expression returned, but not completely. "This isn't over," he said. "No," Lena replied, surprising herself. "But this conversation is." Mark walked away. Harry did not touch Lena. He did not ask if she was all right, because they both knew she wasn't. He simply stood there until she could breathe normally again. After a moment, Lena looked at him. "Thank you," Harry nodded. "But don't make me your redemption project," she added. He seemed to absorb that carefully. Then he said, "I think tonight I'm learning the difference between helping and taking over." Lena looked through the ballroom doors, where Sophie was smiling beside her painting. "So am I," she said. Behind them, Brittany slipped her phone into her clutch, and the truth waited, bright and dangerous, for the right moment to enter the room. The auction began with practiced warmth. A woman in pearls stepped onto the small stage at the front of the ballroom and tapped the microphone twice. The room quieted into polite attention, champagne glasses lowered. Parents turned from private conversations to public generosity. On the screen behind the stage, photographs of student artwork appeared one by one. Lena stood near Sophie's painting with one hand on her daughter's shoulder. She should have felt proud. Instead, she felt the lie breathing beside her. Harry was still there, calm and composed, playing the role of Evan Brooks from Portland, with a level of skill that would have been funny if Lena's nerves had not been fraying by the second. Every time someone called him her brother, shame moved through her in a fresh little wave. She had wanted 5 minutes. Just enough time to keep Mark from making her feel small in front of Sophie. But lies Lena was learning did not stay the size you needed them to be. Across the ballroom, Brittany leaned close to the PTA chair, a woman named Caroline Myers who smiled like she chaired committees in her sleep. Brittany said very little. She only showed Caroline something on her phone, a photo, a headline. Harry Vale, CEO of Valeworks. Caroline's eyes widened. Within minutes, the information moved through the wealthiest corner of the room like perfume. Quietly, invisibly, everywhere at once, Lena noticed the change before she understood it. People began looking at Harry differently, not as the mildly amusing brother of a tired single mother, but as an opportunity standing too close to the dessert table. Then Caroline returned to the microphone. Her smile had sharpened. And before we continue with our student auction, we have a very special surprise tonight. It appears Mr. Harry Vale of Valeworks is with us. The room turned. Lena's stomach dropped. Harry became very still. Beside the stage, Mark looked from Caroline to Harry, then to Lena. Understanding arrived on his face slowly, then cruelly. His smile was almost soft with satisfaction. The fake brother was not a brother. He was a CEO, and Lena had brought him into the room wearing a lie. Caroline lifted a hand toward Harry. Mr. Vale, would you be willing to say a few words? Every eye moved to him, then to Lena. Sophie's fingers tightened around her mother's hand. Harry could have saved it. Lena knew that immediately. Men like Harry had a talent for turning disasters into charming misunderstandings. He could have laughed, claimed privacy, spun the lie into something harmless. He could have made himself the center of the room, and everyone would have let him. But he did not move. He looked at Lena, not asking permission to rescue her, asking what she wanted to teach her daughter next. Lena felt heat flood her face. Her throat tightened. For one terrible second, all she wanted was to disappear behind him and let the richer, calmer person explain everything away. Then she saw Sophie, 7 years old, scared, watching her mother with a look that made Lena understand the cost of one more lie. If Lena let Harry cover for her now, Sophie would learn that her mother's dignity needed a wealthy man to defend it. Lena released Sophie's hand gently. Then she walked toward the stage. The room seemed to stretch with every step. Her thrift store dress suddenly felt too thin. Her shoes hurt, her pulse beat in her ears. Caroline blinked when Lena reached for the microphone, but she handed it over because the room had already sensed drama, and polite people loved drama when it wore formal clothes. Lena looked out at the parents, teachers, donors, Mark, Brittany, Harry, and finally Sophie. Her voice shook at first. She admitted that Harry Vale was not her brother. She had met him in the hallway less than an hour earlier. She had asked him to pretend because she was embarrassed, overwhelmed, and afraid of being judged. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Lena kept going. She said she had been wrong to lie. She was not proud of it. But she would not apologize for wanting someone beside her in a room where being a single mother sometimes felt like arriving already accused. The silence deepened. Lena looked down once, then back up. She said scholarship should not feel like charity wrapped in manners. They should not make children feel as if their families were being inspected before being helped. And children like Sophie should not have to stand beside their artwork while adults whispered about whether their mothers were stable, respectable, or poor in the correct way. Mark's face hardened. Brittany looked away. Lena's voice steadied as she finished. She said Sophie had painted a house with many doors because children understood something adults often forgot. Belonging should not depend on which entrance someone thinks you deserve. When Lena stepped back, no one clapped at first. The room was too stunned. Then a teacher near the back began. A small, uncertain sound. Another person joined. Then another. Not everyone. Some faces remained tight with discomfort. But Lena had not spoken to win the room. She had spoken so Sophie would never think shame was the family inheritance. Harry walked to the stage after her. He did not take the microphone like a man claiming attention. He took it quietly, almost reluctantly. He confirmed his name was Harry Vale. Then he said the important part of the evening was not that a CEO had appeared at a school fundraiser under a fake name. The important part was that a decent mother had felt she needed to invent a brother to be treated with basic respect. He did not announce a giant donation. He did not turn the moment into a Valeworks headline. He simply looked around the ballroom and said that generosity which makes people feel smaller is only another form of power. This time the silence was heavier and cleaner. When he stepped away, Lena could finally breathe. But Mark was waiting near the side exit. His embarrassment had curdled into anger. He kept his voice low, but Sophie was close enough to hear. He said the lie would be useful in court. He said a judge might be interested in a mother who brought strange men into school events and invented family members. He said Sophie needed stability, not performances. Sophie's face crumpled. Lena turned just in time to see her daughter's tears spill over. That hurt more than anything Mark had said. Sophie whispered that maybe if her painting had not been chosen, none of this would have happened. Lena dropped to her knees in front of her. The ballroom blurred around them. Mark, Brittany, Harry, the parents, the auction, all of it faded behind the terrified little girl clutching the edge of her dress. Lena took Sophie's hands and told her the truth. Mommy had been scared. Mommy had made a wrong choice because she did not want people to look down on them. But none of it was Sophie's fault. Not the lie, not Mark's anger, not the whispers. And never, not for 1 second, was Sophie a burden. Sophie collapsed into her arms. Lena held her tightly, no longer caring who watched. Harry stood a few steps away, unable to look away from them. He thought of Noah, sitting at home with a robot kit he had not asked for, and a father who kept trying to replace presence with presence. He realized, with a quiet pain that went straight through him, that it had been far too long since he had told his own child the same thing. You are not the problem. You are not too much. You are not a project I am failing to manage. You are my son. Rain fell hard over Seattle by the time the fundraiser ended. Harry offered to drive Lena and Sophie home, not with the polished confidence of a man trying to take charge, but carefully, as if he knew the wrong tone could turn help into pressure. Lena almost refused. Then Sophie yawned in the lobby, clutching her rolled-up painting with both hands. And Lena remembered the bus stop was 6 blocks away in the rain, so she accepted. The car was warm and too quiet. Sophie fell asleep within 10 minutes, her head against the window, one hand still resting on the cardboard tube that held her painting. Harry kept both hands on the wheel. Lena watched the city lights blur across the wet glass and felt the strange exhaustion that came after surviving public humiliation. She wanted to thank him again. She also wanted to tell him never to come near her life again, because things were already complicated enough. Before she could decide which version of herself to obey, Harry's phone rang. Noah. Harry hesitated, then answered through the car speaker. This time, he did not promise a robot kit. He did not offer a weekend trip or a new model train or anything shiny enough to cover absence. He simply asked his son if he wanted him to come home right away. The silence on the other end was long. Then Noah's small voice filled the car, flat with hurt. He said he did not need another robot. He just wished Harry would stop acting like everything could be rescheduled. Harry's face changed. Not dramatically, not for show. Just enough for Lena to see the sentence hit the place he usually kept protected. He told Noah he was coming home. After the call ended, Harry did not apologize for the awkwardness or make a joke. He only drove through the rain with a grief Lena understood more than she wanted to. She looked at him differently then, not as a CEO, not as the stranger who had pretended to be her brother, not even as the man who had stood beside her in the ballroom, as a father learning something late and hating himself for how late it was. By morning, the story had escaped the hotel. A local parenting blog posted first, "Single mom brings CEO as fake brother to school fundraiser." Then came the comments. Some people called it romantic, others called it embarrassing. A few decided Lena had manipulated a rich widower for attention. By noon, her phone was full. One message from Mark made her hands go cold. He had spoken to a lawyer. He said the incident proved she was impulsive, unstable, and too willing to bring strange men into Sophie's life. Lena sat on the edge of her bed while Sophie watched cartoons in the next room and felt the old panic return. Harry called once. She almost ignored it. When she answered, his voice was careful. He said he knew attorneys who could help. Then he stopped himself. She could almost hear him remembering. Instead, he asked what she wanted. The question undid her more than the offer would have. Lena did not know what she wanted. She wanted Mark to stop using Sophie like a weapon. She wanted the school parents to stop whispering. She wanted Sophie to feel proud of her painting again. She wanted to sleep for 12 hours and wake up in a life where every choice did not feel like evidence in a courtroom. So she said the only thing she could. She needed time. Harry gave it. But time did not protect the children. On Monday, Sophie came home quiet. At first, she said she was tired. Then, while Lena brushed her hair before bed, the truth came out in pieces. A girl at school had said Sophie's mom borrowed a rich man because she did not have a real family. Someone else asked if Harry was going to buy them a mansion. Sophie tried to laugh when she said it, but her chin trembled. Lena held the hairbrush in her lap and felt a rage so clean it frightened her. Across town, Noah had seen the story, too. He did not cry, he was too old for that or trying to be. But when Harry came home early, Noah was sitting at the kitchen table with his robot parts spread untouched in front of him. He asked whether Harry had time to pretend to be someone else's family, because pretending was easier than being his. That one left Harry with no answer. 2 days later, Harry invited Lena and Sophie to a small children's workshop at Valeworks. It was not a public event, not a press opportunity. Just a Saturday program where kids designed model smart homes using cardboard, lights, sensors, and far too much glue. Lena nearly said no. Then Sophie saw the flyer and asked if she could make a house with many doors. So they went. Veilworks was full of glass walls, warm wood, and quiet machines that seemed expensive enough to judge people. Lena arrived tense, ready to leave at the first sign of pity. Harry met them in jeans and a sweater, not a suit. Noah stood beside him, arms crossed, suspicious of everyone. At first the two children barely spoke. Then Sophie noticed Noah's tiny motorized train running around a model living room. She asked why the train went through the kitchen. Noah said emergencies did not care about floor plans. Sophie considered this with deep seriousness, then suggested adding more doors. Within 20 minutes, they were arguing like old collaborators over a cardboard house that needed wheelchair ramps, secret reading corners, a roof garden, and a room where people could be sad without anyone asking too many questions. Lena and Harry watched from a nearby table. Neither of them said much. They did not need to. Their children were building the thing both adults had failed to give them consistently, a place where no one had to earn permission to belong. Then Mark arrived. He walked into the workshop in a raincoat, face tight, phone in hand. Brittany was not with him. Without her polish, he looked less elegant and more afraid. He saw Sophie beside Noah, saw Harry standing near Lena, and his fear became anger. In front of the children, volunteers, and other parents, he accused Lena of pulling Sophie into Harry's world too quickly. He said she was confusing their daughter, chasing attention, and proving exactly why custody needed to be revisited. Sophie went pale. Harry took one step forward, then stopped. Lena felt him stop. That mattered. Because for once, no one was taking the words out of her mouth. Her knees felt weak. Her hands were cold. But she stood between Mark and Sophie and kept her voice steady. She told Mark he had every right to care about who entered Sophie's life. He was her father. That mattered. But he did not have the right to use custody like a punishment every time Lena made a choice he disliked. Mark tried to interrupt. Lena did not let him. She said adults sometimes made mistakes because they were scared. He had. But Sophie was not a prize for the parent who looked better on paper. She was a child, and love for her was not something either of them got to use as leverage. The room went silent. Sophie stared at her mother. Harry remained beside Lena, close enough to be support, far enough not to become the point. For the first time, Noah saw his father not fix a crisis with money, lawyers, or authority. He watched him stand still. He watched him trust someone else's strength. And something in the boy's guarded face softened. Mark looked around the room and realized he had become the scene he claimed to fear. His anger faltered. He left without another threat, though not without one last wounded glance at Lena. When the door closed, Sophie ran into her mother's arms. Lena held her tightly. Harry looked down and found Noah standing beside him. After a moment, Noah slipped his hand into his father's. Harry did not speak. He only held on. Across the room, Sophie lifted her head and looked at the cardboard house with all its crooked doors. For once, she had seen her mother stand without being rescued, and Noah had seen his father love someone by not taking over. Neither child had the words for it yet, but both of them understood. A few weeks later, the story stopped being funny to strangers. The internet moved on. The parents at Sophie's school found newer things to whisper about. Mark did meet with a lawyer, but the conversation did not go the way he had imagined. Using custody as a threat, especially in front of Sophie, did not make him look like the more stable parent. He did not become a perfect father overnight, but for the first time, he seemed to understand that loving Sophie was not the same as winning against Lena. Brittany quietly left the parents' committee before the end of the semester. Before she did, she sent Lena a short email. It was not dramatic. It did not ask for friendship. It simply said she had mistaken politeness for kindness, and she was sorry for making Lena feel small. Lena read it twice, then closed the laptop. Some apologies did not fix things, but they still mattered. Life returned, not to normal, but to something more honest. Lena still worked nights at the hotel. She still packed Sophie's lunches half asleep. She still checked her bank account with one eye closed. But she also enrolled in a part-time interior design course, not because Harry paid for it. He had offered once, carefully, and she had looked at him until he learned better, but because she had finally stopped treating her own dream like an irresponsible guest. Harry changed too. He stopped treating fatherhood like a calendar problem. Twice a week he came home early for dinner with Noah. No phone, no laptop. No expensive apology waiting in a box. Sometimes they talked about Noah's mother. Sometimes they built crooked robot bridges. Sometimes they just ate spaghetti in silence. And Harry learned that presence did not always need a speech. Lena and Harry did not rush. They texted about school forms, workshop schedules, Sophie's drawings, Noah's trains. Coffee after parent meetings became walks by the water. Walks became nids with two children who pretended not to notice everything. Sophie and Noah finished their cardboard house together. It had 14 doors, 3 ramps, a train track through the kitchen, and one small room labeled, "For being sat safely." The school displayed it at the spring art night. Lena arrived wearing a simple green dress Sophie had chosen. Harry came with Noah, no tuxedo, no fake name, no performance. When Lena saw him, she smiled. "So," she said, "who are you pretending to be tonight?" Harry looked at Sophie, then Noah, then back at her. "No one," he said. "If you'll let me, I'd just like to be the man standing beside you." Lena's smile softened, but before she could answer, Sophie grabbed Noah's hand and dragged him toward the snack table with the solemn urgency of children who knew adults needed privacy. Harry reached into his coat pocket. Lena's eyes narrowed. "Harry, it's not what you think. It had better not be a check." He laughed, nervous for the first time since she had known him. He opened his hand. Inside was a tiny brass key, not expensive, not jeweled. Just a simple old-fashioned key tied with a yellow ribbon. Lena stared at it. Harry's voice lowered. "Sophie once said a good house has enough doors so nobody feels locked outside." He swallowed. "I don't want to buy you a house. I don't want to rescue you from your life. I love your life because you're in it. I love Sophie's drawings on the fridge, your terrible night shift coffee, the way you argue with broken lamps before fixing them." Lena's eyes filled. Harry continued quieter now. "This key is to nothing yet. Just a promise that if one day we build something together, it will have every door you need. One for Sophie, one for Noah, one for the people we lost. One for the parts of us that are still scared." He stepped closer, but not too close. Then he knelt. Not in a grand public way, not as a CEO making a scene, just as a man asking a woman who had never wanted to be owned by anyone. "Lena Brooks," he said, "will you marry me someday? Not tonight, not because we need a happy ending, but because I want to spend my life earning the right to stand beside you." Lena covered her mouth. Across the room, Sophie whispered far too loudly, "Mom, say something before he gets knee problems." Lena laughed through her tears. Then she took the key. "Yes, some days, slowly, with a lot of doors." Harry stood, and this time when he took her hand, it was not rescue. It was choice. Behind them, Sophie and Noah's cardboard house glowed under the school lights, crooked and imperfect and full of doors. And Lena finally understood. Family was not always the people who shared your blood, or the people who played a role for one night. Sometimes family began when someone could have walked away after the pretending ended, and chose, day after day, to stay.